no matter what I say or how I say it, every step that I take will present another opportunity for this sort of silencing, which is what I guess a defamation lawsuit is meant to do. It's meant to take your voice.
Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we'll focus on Amber Heard yet again and just quickly review the full segment of her interview with Savannah Guthrie on the Today Show with the NBC Network. This interview was shown on Friday the 17th of June 2022. Now, as we all know by now, this was Amber's first public interview following her losing the defamation trial against ex-husband and movie actor Johnny Depp, where the court deemed her op-ed article written for the Washington Post back in 2018 to be defamatory with malice, as it suggested that she was the victim of domestic abuse at the hands of Johnny Depp. Going through the trial, the evidence proved to be otherwise. Now, her interview was split into short segments, with the previous two shown both on Tuesday the 14th of June and Wednesday the 15th of June. And you can check out my thoughts on those two segments within the channel, and I'll leave some links within the description. So overall, NBC very much wanted to milk this interview and ramp up the views and the obvious ad revenue, in building up to the final 4-hour interview, where it was anticipated to have far some bigger revelations, perhaps some new pieces of evidence which could somehow pose some doubt over the overall verdict of the trial. Well, having watched the interview in its entirety, I have to be honest with you, this didn't really reveal anything that wasn't already known, especially if you've been somebody who has been watching the trial and covering it in depth. There simply was nothing here that you hadn't seen already. The interview itself was very much of a bullet point summary of the trial, what the dispute was, how Amber was perceived in terms of the impact of social media, how she felt the influence of social media somehow impacted the jury and the verdict, how she faced the negative perception, particularly from Johnny's fans when walking to the courtroom each day, all of the testimonies and the exhibits of evidence regarding the photos and the statements made by doctors and therapists. So all of these things we've heard already. Now, I understand that this interview was really made for more people who hadn't watched all of the trial and tried to appeal far more to a general audience. But I think even if you were part of that audience, it still felt too edited in terms of the interview. It was too processed. We were constantly cutting back away from Amber into video clips of the trial, lots of graphics popping in and out, where really you just wanted more focus on Amber herself. And I understand they could only show so much within an hour, but again, if you cover the trial, there was so much that they left out, so much context. And of course, I appreciate that this was more from Amber's perspective. But if you really want to get a full context of the trial, I really would suggest that you watch fully clips of the trial, both from Johnny's and Amber's testimony as well. And I think this interview didn't really do that in terms of encapsulating really what the trial was about fully and why it was that Amber lost the decision overall. So in terms of any new revelation or discovery throughout this trial, the only real element that was really worth talking about was Amber speaking of the notes from her therapist that were made way back in 2011, detailing the alleged abuse that she suffered. If you remember from the trial itself, there was a segment during her testimony where she went into quite graphic detail into the various events of abuse that she felt that she suffered from Johnny. Now, in this interview, she referred to a whole binder of notes that were written by the therapist detailing all of these alleged abuse events. Now, when I looked at this segment, the first question that I asked is, why weren't these notes officially recorded in some formal document? In the interview here, they were very much blurred, so you couldn't really make out what was written here. Again, this may be down to legal constraints within the interview. They couldn't outline who the therapist was and what the dates were within the notes that were presented on view here. Again, the interview skimmed over this fact so quickly, so you barely had chance to really digest what was the notes were about. But essentially, that's my first question, because any professional therapist or doctor, yes, they have to make notes at the time, handwritten, but later on, I would expect them to collate those notes in far more of a structured and a formal document. First off, just to make them far more readable. Secondly, if necessary, they could be omissed far more in evidence format if required. So why weren't they presented as evidence? Surely these notes would prove far more valuable than the testimonies of, let's say, Dr. Spiegel, right? Now, the reason given was that they were only hearsay. But if we look at testimonies such as Dr. Spiegel or Richard Moore, who was analysing the overall event of the bottle incident where Johnny cut his finger, those two people didn't actually interact with either Johnny or Amber. They were giving their opinions from an outside perspective. So couldn't we say that their testimonies are hearsay because they're already giving their opinion? If this batch of notes from a therapist is true, then that therapist has had some interaction with Amber. They've had a chance to gauge her reactions and her overall mental state of mind, something that was hinted out throughout this trial, both through the testimonies of Dr. Shannon Curry and also Dr. Diane Hughes. So if the therapist has interacted with Amber during these times of abuse, then for me that would prove far more significant and far more valuable in an evidence within a trial than some of the other testimonies that we heard, where it was people just stating what they saw or where it was people indicating what they didn't see. So it begs the question again, why didn't the therapist come forward? Why weren't they called as an overall witness? This surely would have proved beneficial to Amber to have a professional coming forward and reporting on her overall state of mind. How come the therapist wasn't named within the interview? Now, there's probably legal and confidential reasons behind this. But again, if I'm in Amber's position, where we're talking about a trial where you're trying to sue for $100 million worth of damages, then I'm going to try and utilise every single witness that I can in order to try and win this trial. So again, this would have been far more beneficial to her had she submitted this forward. So I don't understand why this was brought forward if it's proved to be genuine, as I think the therapist's notes would have been far more beneficial to Amber. Later on within the interview, they then brought up screenshots of text messages that were supposedly excluded from trial. Again, why were they excluded from the trial? We saw many instances of Johnny's text messages that were sent when he was sending messages to his friends, talking about Amber in a certain far way, admittedly. We also saw text messages that he was sending to Dr. Kipper when he incurred his injury. There were other text messages when he was talking about Amber and her role within Aquaman. Certain text messages sent to the likes of Paul Bettany as well. So if we're using Johnny's text messages, which are quite explicit in their language, why aren't we using these text messages? Again, in the flow of this interview, a lot of the text messages, they were shown at certain angles. It was all quickly edited, so you couldn't really have a chance to focus really what was going on in terms of the dates and the timestamps. Again, you'd probably have to pause and play the interview going back to really get the full detail of these text messages. The text messages themselves, they consisted of Amber talking about how Johnny supposedly kicked her on a plane. Again, this was something she referred to during her testimony. Another text message stated that Johnny did her number on her and she thought that she had concussion. So again, why weren't these text messages admitted within the trial itself? Again, they could have proved very beneficial. Of course, we didn't see the full transcripts. That wasn't shown within the interview here. And of course, if the text messages were presented within the trial, we would of course ask where do they come from. We want the full version, and of course we would expect some sort of metadata in order to support the validity of these text messages. There's no point in showing them in the interview here now because it's too late unless she plans to use them later on in the appeal. But why would they be deemed acceptable in the appeal if they weren't deemed acceptable before? So overall, there's just too many questions over these new pieces of supposed evidence that of course the interview won't really delve too much into. And this is again raising the debate about how mainstream media covers events like this. I've always fully supported the televisation of this trial because it allowed us all to fully view the evidence in explicit detail, something that wouldn't have happened if indeed the trial was not televised. So after this, really the rest of the interview consisted of parts that we'd already seen in the previous two segments. And we're looking back on the interview overall, I think the most interesting parts of the interview were already shown in the segments. The full interview itself didn't really offer anything more. So when we look at this overall, what was the purpose of this interview? For Amber to get her side of the story once again, hoping for some other evidence to appear, or hoping maybe that her coming out in this interview would maybe encourage some other person or individual to come forward, providing some sort of evidence that could support Amber's story. Did it really have any effect in terms of Amber's perception or her image? I don't really think that it did. I think overall, from the reactions that I've seen online, there's been no swing in perception of both Amber or Johnny. For the most part, people still think Amber is a liar. They still think that she's making all of this stuff up. They remain unconvinced by her story. It did nothing to appease concerns over the supposed photographs that were taken both during and post her appearance outside the courthouse in 2016. It did nothing to appease the concerns over how TMC got the original footage of Johnny slapping the cabinets. It did nothing to appease the concerns about the audio clips that we heard, or indeed the missed charity payments to the LCU and the Children's Hospital. And once again, because this is mainstream media, they wouldn't have had the time to go over all of those points, even though, to be fair, Savannah did bring up the issues of the audio clips and the photos. She did bring those up to Amber, and she did indeed bring up the perceptions of how people think that she's a liar, and also the fact that nobody else had come forward in terms of Johnny's ex-partner. In that instance, Amber replied, "Look what happened when I came forward." Well, it's not quite as simple as that. You can't just say because I came forward and it did happen, that means anybody else would come forward, it would also happen to them. No. Everybody has different set of circumstances which require different sets of evidence. So just because your story didn't pan out, Amber, doesn't mean that other people, if it happened to them, would pan out the same as yours. So I didn't agree with that kind of generalization that she made within the interview. But again, for the most part, people feel that Amber now should just let it go and move on with her life and very much concentrate with trying to settle with Johnny in terms of the amount that she owes, which is overall 8.35 million. Overall, there's still almost complete favour and support to Johnny, who's very much moving on with his life. We've seen in multiple reports him playing with his rock band. He seems very happy. He's signing autographs and looking very much at peace at himself, and I'm pretty much sure he's in the early stages of planning to make more movies. So we've already covered this in previous videos, but we asked the question again, where does Amber go after this interview? Now, unless there's some bombshell revelation, what really more can she say? What really more can be done to support her case? Now, I assume she still has plans to appeal, but can she really afford it when already owing Johnny so much money? Will she employ the same legal team of Ben Rottenborn and Elaine Bradenhoft, or will she go for somebody different? I really can't see what else she can do now. As I've said in multiple videos, I think the best option for her was to just lay low, let things die down a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then slowly try and creep her way back into the media spotlight. I think that was the best option in terms of trying to put herself back in some sort of good graces of the public. Even then, I think that's still difficult. But if this is what she wants to do in terms of taking things head on, then we will wait and see. I think from Johnny's perspective, the best thing for him to do is just to not react, not to respond in any way. He's already got the victory. He's already happier with his life. He doesn't need to do anything. I'm pretty sure that both Ben Chu and Camille Vasquez, Johnny's legal team, will be noting everything down that Amber has said and posted, and really just store it up just in case Amber makes some sort of drastic action or calls for appeal. They can certainly stock up all of this footage and, if need, accuse her of defaming Johnny once again. So we'll wait and see what happens in the future if there are any further updates. I may do a further video really looking at more from Warner Brothers in terms of what they can do regarding Amber's role within Aquaman. We've had so many stories about whether she's been cut from the film, whether she's got additional footage from the film. I've waited to see confirmation from Warner Brothers, and again, I think they're putting out certain updates to gauge reaction as what can be done in terms of Amber's situation, but we'll speculate on that in another video. But in terms of this interview, like I said, I don't think it had any more purpose or benefit in terms of Amber's situation. Her position really hasn't changed, and I think at this point she really needs to let it go and just move on and start rebuilding her overall career and image, if that's possible at all. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings on the final full 1 hour interview of Amber Heard with NBC and Savannah Guthrie. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think it's improved Amber's position? Do you think it's made it worse? Do you think she should persist with the appeal, carry on posting on social media, carry on doing more interviews, or do you think she should really let it go now and try and focus on with her career and also her future as well with her child? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.